the so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism, completely full of innuendo and slurs. It should never have been broadcast by the BBC. You know, the reality was that Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, had done his best. There's a very small Sikh population which are promoting Khalistan. Pakistan, I'm afraid their economy is shot to pieces, and I think my message for them is that, look, you've got to listen to what the IMF is advising you to do. You know, you can't just go appealing to the world for money and support. So we are two countries with a shared past and a tremendous future ahead of us. The one thing I agreed with, by the way, within this propaganda video, was the final comments, which said that Narendra Modi and the BJP government will probably be re-elected next time and the time after that.
Happening at the time, you know, when there's a big news happening, you know, of BBC releasing a documentary on PM Modi and their income tax raids on the BBC office in Delhi and Mumbai.
Yes.
So how do you see all these things happening related to BBC and the documentary?
Well, I don't conflate the two issues at all. I mean, obviously, the so-called documentary, which was more of a propaganda video, if you like, in a two-part series, was an absolutely disgraceful piece of shoddy journalism with an attack on Narendra Modi, both in his time as Chief Minister of Gujarat and then in his time as Prime Minister. Completely full of innuendo and slurs. It should never have been broadcast by the BBC. And of course, because the BBC has a worldwide reputation, people think, oh my goodness, this must be true. But it was produced by an external organisation, overseen by the BBC, and then broadcast as the truth. Well, it's far from the truth. I mean, it dismissed, for a start, it actually didn't look in detail at the causes for the Gujarat riots 20 years ago, and it certainly didn't look at the all-important fact that the Supreme Court had thoroughly investigated all the claims against Narendra Modi and found there not a shred of evidence to support them. So, you know, the reality was that Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, had done his best to try and appeal for calm. He looked to additional police resources, not only within Gujarat but beyond, and eventually he had to call in the army to help quell the riots. They showed film of him making appeals for calm and encouraging people to not to riot. Yet the slurs that were given were outrageous. And then, of course, put a whole series of different montages together with different people whose... I don't know all the people involved, but it was clearly they all had an axe to grind against Narendra Modi. Now, the issue around the review of the BBC's tax affairs, I understand, is nothing new. This has been going on for quite some time, and obviously there have been discussions between the Inland Revenue here, the income tax authorities here, and the BBC. Obviously, this is a survey where the income tax authorities have looked to gather the evidence to establish if the BBC is doing anything wrong. I would say quite openly, it's the BBC's job in operating within India is to make sure they accord with the rules and regulations, and I'm sure it'll be cleared up very quickly. But you know, that's up to the authorities, the tax authorities. It's also up to the BBC to make sure they're accorded with the rules that operate here. And I think there's a risk that a lot of the media have immediately said, "Oh my goodness me, this is some form of attack on the media." Personally, I don't see it that way. I think it's a review, it's a survey. It's at the moment there haven't been suggestions of charges or anything like that. So we are in the position whereby let the authorities operate, let the BBC act as they have done, in an open and transparent way, providing access to all the records and all the information, and then let the tax authorities come to their conclusions. And I trust that will be cleared up very quickly, because it's the benefit of the tax authorities and for the BBC.
You call this documentary as a propaganda video by BBC. So do you believe that this is an editorial choice of some of the people in BBC, or is it the policy of the British government?
Let's be very clear. the BBC is not an arm of the British government. In fact, the BBC is frequently critical of the British government, and actually, to be fair, critical of all British governments there have ever been. That's their job. Their job is to ask questions, to look for evidence. But the key here is you can ask questions, but when there's evidence to the contrary, and it's quite clearly not the case, then you shouldn't be casting aspersions. And I think that's the difference here, which I think is extremely regrettable, because it would seem as if there was some sort of agenda with the BBC to disrupt UK-India relations, and I think that's a great shame. I asked our Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, within the Chamber, Foreign Office questions, to actually make clear the government's policy. And of course he made clear the BBC is an independent organisation. They must do whatever they choose to do. But it is not the policy of the British government. And the British government regards India as a strong friend and a strong ally. And of course, we signed about a year ago now a cooperation agreement between the UK and India on security, defence and other matters. And that demonstrates the goodwill between our countries. And we are two countries with a shared past and a tremendous future ahead of us. And we are at the moment negotiating what could be an incredible free trade deal which will benefit India and the United Kingdom. So anything that disrupts that, I think, is regrettable, particularly when it's without foundation.
This episode has created a ripple effect in the country, because next year is the election time.
Yeah.
So does it somehow affect the relations between India and the Britain?
Well, I sincerely hope not. I mean, I think the one thing I agreed with, by the way, within this propaganda video, was the final comments, which said that Narendra Modi and the BJP government will probably be re-elected next time and the time after that. And so they deserve it, because the Indian government have done a remarkable job under Narendra Modi of transforming the economy in India, leading India to become the fifth biggest economy now in the world, on track to become the leading economy in the world on the way that it's going, and the most populous country in the world. We also have to celebrate the fact that India is the biggest democracy in the world, where the government can be replaced if that's what the people decide. So from that perspective, it's very important that we build the friendship and we build the relationship between the two countries, and we do so because obviously India has the G20 role this year. It's going to be welcoming the leaders of the world to here, and it's important that we cement our goodwill and good relations. And if we don't, that will be detrimental to India and also to the United Kingdom.
Let's talk about the other things. Like in Britain, we have seen anti-Hindu sentiments growing up. Especially among the Islamists and the Khalistanis. Who are holding a stronghold in cities like London, and there was an attack on temples in Leicester as well.
Sorry, I've been in India for this week, so I haven't seen all the details of what's gone on. The reality is that what we have to do is to counter this narrative. In an area, I represent Harrow, and in our area we have people of every religion, of every. In fact, I can probably take you to someone from every country in the world who lives in my constituency. Every language is spoken, every religion is celebrated, and people live together in peace and harmony. And I wouldn't want it any other way. So that demonstrates that we can have a situation where people do cooperate together. It's very important that the different faith organisations come together, they speak together, and if there's any concerns, any tensions, then actually they talk about them rather than resorting to demonstrations and causing trouble. Last year we had real problems in Leicester, where frankly what happened was some external people came into Leicester. For the last 50 years or more, people have lived alongside each other in Leicester. Different Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs, Jains have lived alongside each other quite harmoniously. But there was false propaganda put about that a mosque had been attacked, and the Leicester police had to put a social media broadcast out to say this was not true. That caused people from outside Leicester to come in, and then there were riots and anti-Hindu action taking place, and we had temples attacked and people, I'm afraid, physically attacked. And that's extremely regrettable. Should not have happened, and the people responsible, clearly a large number of them were arrested and dealt with appropriately. But the problem is that in different parts of the United Kingdom now, we're getting this feeling of dissension, and indeed, as you say, Islamist. Now, the 99.99% of the Muslim population within the UK are peaceful, peace-loving people. They just want to go on with their lives, celebrate their religion, of course. There's this very small minority that want to cause trouble. They become terrorists. They may groom others. They may encourage people to be radicalised. And we have to counter that very, very aptly. And I think one of the problems we're facing is how we deal with that. There's a very small Sikh population which are promoting Khalistan and Khalistani, not quite terrorism in the UK, but certainly disorder. And that has to be prevented as well. And we had recently, just the last week, we had a report published on the Prevent Review, which is aiming at preventing extremism, whether it's from the far right, from Islamists or Khalistanis, how we prevent that from happening. And it's quite clear that has failed in the United Kingdom, and that we do have to do far more, particularly, I'm afraid, where now, because of the ease of access over the internet and social media, young people can be radicalised literally in their bedrooms. And of course they then become radicalised, and then they have hatred placed in their minds, and they hate people who could be their neighbours, just because of their religion or background. We have to counter that. I don't think we fully understand the extent of that going on, and we don't understand the reasons why people do become radicalised. What we do know is there's a number of hate preachers that wish to radicalise people on that basis. And I would say very simply, that Hindus in the United Kingdom, Jains, Sikhs, Muslims, as I say, predominantly peace-loving people, and we need to ensure that message is rolled out.
Bob, we have seen you also face some kind of criticism, by supporting India and the Prime Minister Modi. So how do you feel, after seeing such kind of criticism by a section of people?
I'm not particularly bothered. It's like water off a duck's back, as they say. As far as I'm concerned, I've been a supporter of overseas friends of BJP for a very long time. I regard BJP as the natural ally for the Conservative Party. Obviously, the Conservative Party in the United Kingdom, BJP over here, and it's that friendship and it's that support that we value. Narendra Modi, as Chief Minister, turned Gujarat into the powerhouse of the economy of India, and now he's transformed India and is assisting in every area of India. So he's done a remarkably good job, as has the government. What we need now to do is obviously build on that friendship and utilise some of the opportunities that we've got to have that free trade deal, and then enhance our trade between the two countries. We already know, for example, the trade deal between India and the UAE has improved trade, 90% or something incredibly, in less than a year. We hope to do the same thing with a free trade deal with India. So when people criticise me, I say, well, what's your alternative? Who do you back, and why do you back them? And I do speak up in the United Kingdom Parliament on behalf of my constituents, many of whom are of Indian origin, some 37% of Indian origin, and therefore it's absolutely right that people think about where they originally came from, or where their families originally came from. We're now on the fourth generation of people in the United Kingdom, but they still have a love of India, and so they should.
How do you see the bilateral relations between India and Britain, in the coming years? As you have a new Prime Minister out there. Yeah,
well, of course, we have the first Hindu Prime Minister in the United Kingdom. First, obviously of Indian origin. We also have had the first female Prime Minister, but we didn't stop there, because remember, we had the first Hindu Chancellor, first Hindu Home Secretary, the first Hindu Environment Secretary, effectively, and indeed have led the world. We had of course, a prominent Muslim as Chancellor, Health Secretary, and a number of other jobs in government. So, in the United Kingdom, we believe very firmly, and certainly in the Conservative Party, in promoting people on their abilities and their capabilities. So, from that perspective, it's a bright future. Now, as we reach out to our friends across the Commonwealth, one of the issues that is very, very clear is that when we left the European Union, we wanted to reunite with our Commonwealth partners, which in many ways we turned our back on our Commonwealth partners, be it India, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and other countries around, and the West Indies, and right across the world. And now we're reuniting with those countries. And it's very important that we do so on a trade basis, but it's not just trade. It's security, it's cooperation, it's in ensuring that we come together in a like-minded fashion. And I think because we have this historical links, and obviously, we're no longer a colonialist empire, but we have those links, that there is an understanding of how all countries operate, and an affection, I think, for the United Kingdom. We have a great advantage in. We had the very sad death of Queen Elizabeth II, but now we have King Charles, and I think he's well known throughout the Commonwealth and will be a first-class figurehead to take us forward. And I think he will be respected not only in India but in other countries as well. So part and parcel of this is how we grow together and have the opportunities together. Now there will be sticking points, and there'll be points at which we need to discuss and agree. But that's fine. I mean, friends do have that. They have agreements, but the difference is that friends sit down at the table and discuss it and then reach a conclusion.
My question is about a global threat which is emerging because of the rise of extremism and terrorism. Especially emanating from Afghanistan and Pakistan. So how do you see this kind of threat affecting the global peace?
Well, I mean, obviously, the people that foster terrorism or state-sponsored terrorism is fundamentally wrong, and we've got to counter that for all we can. My personal view is that it was a mistake to withdraw from Afghanistan in the way that we did. Obviously, the Americans made the key decision to withdraw their troops, and that meant that we had to follow, because we would not be in a position to carry out the duties there by ourselves. So that to me was a mistake, because we've seen once again the Taliban take over, and gradually and slowly we've seen the Taliban extinguish women's rights that were hard fought and hard won. And I think that's a really retrograde step that's taken place in Afghanistan. We do know, of course, obviously, that Afghanistan, Pakistan is part and parcel of the drug trade, the illegal drug trade that takes place, and we need to counter that as well. In Pakistan, I'm afraid their economy is shot to pieces, and I think my message for them is that, look, you've got to listen to what the IMF is advising you to do. You've got to bring your economy into shape. You can't just go appealing to the world for money and support, but you must put things right. And the first duty then is to say, look, where you've got terrorist bases, particularly in the illegally occupied part of Kashmir, have those terrorist bases dismantled, and then restore peace.